Colo River is about 90 minutes from Sydney. You can get there by going up the M7 and out to Windsor and up the Putty Road, or you can go through Hornsby and Glenorrey and then cut across to Lower Portland where you get the ferry. The Colo is pretty rare by Sydney standards. It's a freshwater paddle that's driven by the current, and it doesn't have rapids, so if you're a recreational kayaker, it's actually a pretty cool change to the kind of paddling you're normally doing. The current makes it difficult to paddle back to the launch, so you do need to consider a car shuttle. We started our day at Skeleton Rocks. That's where the Colo enters the Hawkesbury. From there, it was about a 30-minute drive up to the Upper Colo Bridge. Our plan for the day was to meet at Skeleton Rocks and then transfer kayaks onto two cars, which we'd use to drive up to the Upper Colo Bridge. Once we got there, we had about a 23-kilometre paddle with the current assisting us to get back to the cars. From there, we could get the cars that we left behind and all go out via the Putty Road. The Upper Colo Bridge was washed away in the floods in 2021, so last time we were here, there was nothing to see. They've rebuilt the bridge and used some of the timber from the original construction. After a little bit of organising, we were seen on the water. The water was sitting at about 82 centimetres according to the paddler's guide. That's low for this river, although it was higher than last time we tried it. I was actually hopeful we'd have a better trip, but we did find a lot of sand on the way down that slowed the first half of the journey. Paddling with a current is pretty unique. It's not something that you normally get to do in Sydney. Normally when you stop paddling, the boat stops, or at the very least is affected by the tide or the swell. In a river like the Colo, you're constantly moving. You put your paddle down for a second and it's gone. So one of the things you need to be aware of is making sure everything's attached to the boat. It also means that if you manage to hit a rock or a log, you're likely to be flipped and can potentially be pinned under. The other thing that you see in this river that you don't see many other places is quicksand. A couple of times I stood out of the boat and quickly sank up to my backside in the water. The team today were all part of the kayaking group I belong to, the Wet Sponges. In this photo you can see Gay and Kristen and Martin, and the other person that was with us was Josh in the orange kayak. One of the other factors you need to consider when you're paddling this river is that there's really only a couple of entry and exit points. So the Upper Colo Bridge is about as far as you can get via road, and it's where most people start. At the midway point you have the Putty Road Bridge. There's a kayak launch area here, and it's a good spot to stop if you're not used to it. Then you've got another 10 kilometres before you end up back at Skeleton Rocks. The first 6 kilometres were pretty shallow, and we did spend a fair bit of time dragging the boats. Once we got past that and it got deeper, we decided to stop for lunch. With nothing else to do, I thought it was actually a good opportunity to pull out the drone and get some aerial shots. With lunch out of the way, we continued on. This part of the river's a little bit wider and there is some depth to it, but we did still find a lot of sand that's washed down recently. This is a bit of a nuisance because it means that you can't be sure if you're going to run aground. And quite often you'd be paddling, and if you hadn't read the line of the river properly, you'd end up stopping. Once you start getting close to the putty bridge, it does start to get a bit deeper, and you can actually see where the water starts to slow down and it's not as affected by current. If you're not sure whether to go on, this is your last chance to get out, as there really weren't any other options once we passed this one. The bridge at Putty Road is pretty cool, and apparently it's floodproof. We had a quick look at the artwork and thought about getting out on the canoe launch area, but ultimately decided to push on, a little bit concerned that daylight was going to run out before we got back to the car. So this is just at the start of the second leg of the journey. We've just left the Putty Road Bridge behind and we're on our way back to the launch. Well, the launch, it's where we left the cars this morning. I've got maybe 8 k's left to go. I should ask if everyone's okay with being in my video. As you get closer to the end of the river, it actually starts to widen quite a bit, and there was some more depth to it, so we didn't run aground in this section. It's a really nice paddle, there's a lot to see, and it's a little bit more like the rivers you'd see around Sydney, but you do still have that gentle push behind you from the current. Down the end it's quite tidal, and you can see where the high and low tide marks are. That current also comes into effect when you're trying to catch your drone as the battery runs down, especially if you've told it to return to home, which can be quite a long way from where you've started. The water in this section though is really clear, and it's surprising how well you can see the bottom even when it's quite deep. It's probably one of the things I like most about this river. Down this end we also saw a lot more bird life. There are a number of ducks and also a lot of native birds that were in the area. That 23 k's I was talking about earlier, it was actually more like 26. So when we finally saw the bridge at Lower Portland, we knew the trip was over and we started to relax. It was a pretty cool feeling having come that far in what were pretty short kayaks for most of us for the day. The boat ramp at Skeleton Rocks is pretty well maintained, and it also wasn't slippery, so it was easy to get out and get back into the cars. I was pretty happy with the day overall, and once we loaded up, I stopped and took a little bit of video of the same scene that I had at the start of the day. Of course, at this point I realised we still had a half-hour drive back to where we'd left my car, so we could load everything up and everybody could go home.